comes when the world's largest car market takes on one of the most influential trade blocs in history. Could a single trade dispute reshape industries, challenge alliances, and alter the global balance of power? In 2024, a high-stakes economic confrontation erupted between China and the European Union. It started with electric vehicles, a symbol of the green future, but quickly spiraled into a broader conflict, with France's iconic Brandy unexpectedly caught in the crossfire. Today we'll uncover how a simple tariff war turned into a dramatic tale of retaliation, diplomacy, and economic survival. The rise of China's EV industry. To understand this story, we need to go back to the meteoric rise of China's electric vehicle industry. Over the past decade, China has invested heavily in green technology, aiming to become a leader in the global energy transition. Backed by government subsidies, cheap labor, and an extensive supply chain for batteries, Chinese EV brands like BYD, NIO, and Geely began dominating global markets. By 2024, China's exports of new energy vehicles hit an all-time high. A staggering 1.17 million EVs were shipped abroad in just the first 7 months of the year. Europe became a key destination, with Chinese brands capturing 20% of all EV registrations. But this success didn't sit well with Europe. For decades, the region prided itself on being the home of luxury automakers like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi. The influx of cheaper, high-quality Chinese EVs threatened their dominance, particularly in France, where brands like Renault and Peugeot felt the pressure. The EU strikes back. Faced with mounting competition, the EU took action. In September 2024, the European Commission launched an investigation into Chinese EVs, claiming they benefited from unfair state subsidies. By November, the EU announced tariffs of up to 45% on imported Chinese electric vehicles. French President Emmanuel Macron, a vocal supporter of the tariffs, framed the move as a defense of Europe's automotive industry and a step toward fair competition. The logic seemed simple. By making Chinese EVs more expensive, European automakers would regain market share. But as they say, every action has a reaction. China's response was swift and strategic. Rather than retaliating with generic trade measures, it targeted an industry synonymous with French heritage, brandy. On November 15th, China imposed anti-dumping deposits on EU-imported brandy ranging from 30.6% to 39%. For France, this was a direct hit. Why? Because China is the largest consumer of French cognac, even surpassing the United States. French brandy exports to China were worth over $1 billion annually, accounting for nearly all EU exports of the product. Companies like Hennessy and Remy Martin, whose profits heavily relied on Chinese consumers, suddenly found themselves in jeopardy. But why brandy? Beyond its economic significance, brandy is a symbol of French culture and prestige. By targeting it, China sent a clear message. If you attack our industries, we will strike where it hurts the most. For many in France, this wasn't just an economic issue, it was a blow to national pride. The vineyards of Cognac, where brandy has been produced for centuries, became the unlikely battleground in a 21st century trade war. In Cognac, small producers worried about losing their livelihoods. Exporters reported declining orders, with some shipments halted altogether. Share prices of French spirits giants like LVMH and Remy Cointreau dropped sharply, wiping out millions in market value. One local vineyard owner described the situation as a nightmare, saying, "We've spent generations building relationships in China. Now everything is at risk because of politics." For the 85,000 workers directly and indirectly employed by the cognac industry, the stakes couldn't be higher. A prolonged dispute could mean layoffs, reduced production, and even closures. But brandy wasn't the only target. In a calculated escalation, China also restricted exports of rare earth minerals, key components in EV batteries and renewable energy technology. Europe, which relies on China for 98% of its rare earth imports, suddenly faced a critical supply chain dilemma. China further launched investigations into EU pork and dairy imports, threatening to cut market access for European farmers. These measures sent shockwaves through the European economy, prompting some leaders to question whether the EV tariffs were worth the price. For the European Union, the situation was complex. On one hand, protecting its automotive industry was a political necessity, especially in France and Germany, where automakers are major employers. On the other hand, losing access to China's vast consumer market posed an existential threat to industries beyond cars. French President Macron faced mounting pressure from cognac producers who called on him to resolve the dispute. In Brussels, EU officials debated whether to negotiate or stand firm. Meanwhile, China held its ground, demanding the EU roll back its tariffs before any talks could begin. Global implications. This isn't just a story about Europe and China. It's a glimpse into the future of global trade. For decades, Western nations dominated international markets, setting the rules of the game. But China's rise has shifted the balance, with Beijing increasingly willing to challenge the status quo. For emerging markets, this trade war has opened new opportunities. While Europe imposes tariffs, China is redirecting its EV exports to Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. In Brazil, Chinese EV sales have skyrocketed, and in Thailand, BYD is building a factory capable of producing 150,000 vehicles annually. The outcome of this dispute could shape global trade dynamics for years to come. If Europe backs down, it risks losing credibility and further opening its markets to Chinese competition. But if it holds firm, the economic damage could spread, hurting industries far beyond automotive and spirits. For China, this is about more than trade. It's a demonstration of its growing influence. By targeting strategic industries, it's showing the world that it won't be bullied, even by powerful trade blocs like the EU. So, where does this leave us? France finds itself at a crossroads. It can double down on its tariffs, risking further losses to its iconic cognac industry, or it can negotiate a truce with China, potentially opening the door for broader trade reforms. As for China, this trade war is both a challenge and an opportunity. By weathering Europe's tariffs and expanding into new markets, it's proving that its economic ambitions are unstoppable. But the biggest question remains: in a world where economic power is constantly shifting, who will come out on top? Thanks for watching, and until next time.